Hello everyone, it is Jazz here, and today I'm doing my April reading wrap-up as well as my May to be read, sort of. We'll get to why it's sort of later in the video. Anyway, I read 4 books in April and they were all fantasy and sci-fi books, so I thought that was a genuine occasion to wear some unicorn hair today. So me and my unicorn hair are gonna go ahead and cosplay and talk about some fabulous books. The first book that I completed in April was The Light Princess by George MacDonald. This is a classic Scottish fairy tale, and it is about a girl who was born to a king and queen like any other normal princess, and at her christening her parents accidentally, but not really accidentally, forget to invite her aunt to the party, and her aunt, who is kind of a witch, literally says, oh heck no, that is not cool, and she basically curses the princess to not be subject to gravity. So she is literally a light princess. She just floats around in the air, and she could float away if not for precautions. And the story kind of goes on from there about how she can maybe not be so much of a light princess. I decided to read The Light Princess on a whim. I saw it on my Scribd app, so I just gave it a go because it looked like a very short, quick read, which it definitely is. It is something, if you just want to pick up something like that's quick that you can read really fast in like a day or two, The Light Princess is definitely something to look at. It has a really cool quality because it is definitely a fairy tale, but it has a little bit more characterization than maybe a Grimm's fairy tale or a Hans Christian Andersen fairy tale, whereas those are more like story driven. This one is fairly story driven, but it does have a little bit more like characterization, I felt, with the characters, just because there is a lot of humor injected into the story, and that kind of makes it a little different from your average fairy tale. Plus the plot kind of runs a little different than your average fairy tale. Like, it hits your fairy tale storyline plot points that most of them hit, but it does it in a different way, and I thought that was really cool. The only thing that I would probably say that I didn't love about it is that the author is fond of doing that long sentence thing where I start the sentence and then by the end of the sentence I don't know what I just read, and that's just a weird pet peeve of mine. That's just like my personal pet peeve. I don't like sentences that run like that because I end up reading the sentence like 3 times trying to figure out what the author's trying to say, but that doesn't happen too often in the story. It wasn't enough to like ruin my experience of reading the book. Overall, I really enjoyed this. I wouldn't mind having The Light Princess in my library, owning a nice physical copy of it, so it was a cool little discovery. And also, I believe this story is the basis of a musical, which has music written by Tori Amos in it, and I've been interested in listening to the music from the musical, but I wanted a little bit of context for the storyline, and now I feel like I might have enough context from the storyline to check out some of the music from that. So it was a win-win situation, and I give this book 4 stars. The next 2 books were books that I completed for the Tome Topple Readathon Round 3. So I read these books in the 2 weeks of that readathon, and they were the 2 that I had a goal to finish for that readathon. I did read some other books that I just wanted to start for that, but these were the 2 that I wanted to finish. So the first one that I completed for Tome Topple was Vaught by Scott McCloud. This is about a superhero named Vaught. He lives in a alternate universe, so it's like our Earth, but it is a utopian version of our Earth. And he also is friends, sort of more than friends, with this girl Jenny, who is from our normal Earth, which is not at all utopian, as you know. First half of the stories in here are about Jenny crossing over to Vaught's world, what happens there, what kind of crazy supervillains kind of take over, and all sorts of crazy stuff with Vaught's friends and Vaught's life experience. The other half is about Vaught living in Jenny's world, or our world, and the things that happen there, and what kind of friendships and things go on with that. This 575-page collection collects issues 11 through 36, and they are the black and white versions of this comic. There is a 10-issue comic of Vaught that is all in color that you can get, but this collection was intended to be sort of a reboot of the previous series. So though there are things that happen that kind of have to do with the 10 issues, you can still read this without reading the previous 10 issues in color. I know that I did. I hadn't read any of the previous 10, and I could still really get into this and understand what was happening. I had such a good time reading this book. It has this really cool tone to it where it is really whimsical, but it is also thought-provoking at the same time. So you're getting like a good giggle, and then when you like go back and think about maybe the scene or the issue that you just read, you go, oh, that was really deep, and that had a lot of things to think about. I really enjoyed the characters. Friendships in this book are so very heartwarming and lovely and interesting. I also really like that Scott McCloud would write a little tidbit about his thoughts on different sections of the comic. After maybe an issue or 3 issues, he would say like his ideology on where he got his creative inspiration for that storyline, or what he was thinking about the art in the story, or just something that was going on in his life when he wrote it. And I found all those things really interesting, particularly because I haven't read anything else by him. He's a very popular graphic novel and comic book artist and writer, but I have never read anything that he's written before this, and so thus it kind of made me want to read more of his work, seeing his creative process. In terms of the art, I really like the art. Sometimes when you read a black and white graphic novel, you can't tell what the heck is going on in it, and I would say that is not the case in Vaught. I definitely could 100% see what was going on in the storyline. There was definitely enough detail and all those things to make everything come across, and it's definitely not maybe like how modern graphic novel art looks like, but it's like really good. I decided overall to give this 5 stars. I do feel like there are some moments in here that are sort of 4.5 star-y for me, but it wasn't enough for me to like go, oh, I have to put 4.5 stars on my review on Goodreads and then round it up. I definitely would still give this mostly overall 5 stars. The next book that I completed for the Tome Topple Readathon was the ever-popular A Game of Thrones by George R.R. Martin. This is the first book in the Song of Ice and Fire series, aka the Game of Thrones series, whatever you decide to call it. I'm not really sure how to summarize this epic book, and I kind of don't want to even try. Just know that it's a high fantasy and insanity and political drama ensues, and you pretty much got the gist. And I will also just link you to the summary on Goodreads. I buddy read A Game of Thrones with my mom and a few people from the Tome Topple Goodreads group that were also reading this book for the first time. A lot of us had not watched the show, including myself, but there were a few who had watched it, and those people were very helpful in kind of navigating the way to approach the story. But I found it really fun as a person that doesn't watch the show yet, reading it, not knowing anything about it. Like, I knew nothing about it except maybe that it had some dragons in it and maybe like 2 characters' names, and that was about it. It was a really fun way to approach the story because I didn't know any of the things that were going to happen, and then everything that was crazy was a surprise. And I say, girls and boys, it like wowed me. It like knocked me over. I was like, I love this so much. I totally get the phenomenon. So all the stuff that I really love about a good high fantasy novel were in this book. The world building was really excellent. The characters are really interesting and layered, and you get really invested in them, and there's also some in there that you love to hate and want to smack silly, or as I like to say, I want to feed some people to the dire wolves, okay? I know it's mean, but it made me feel better. And the story structure is really great. I really liked, too, that each chapter is from a different character's point of view, so you're getting to see the whole span of what's going on, and it's also really cool to see when the characters meet and cross over, and different characters' points of views of other characters. It's another element that really kept me wanting to know what was going to happen and reading. So even though it's an 800-page book, it didn't feel like a really long book because the chapters are really short and there's always a new point of view to read. Now, I did also listen to this partially an audiobook and partially just read it on my e-reader. I really do like how the narrator reads the story, but it wasn't like my ideal audiobook, and it has nothing really to do with the reader. I think he read it excellently. It's just the kind of book where I kind of preferred to make up the voices of the characters in my head. But it was really convenient, especially in a situation like a readathon when I wanted to get as much reading time on the book as I could. I will say that one really good element of reading this for the first time in ebook, especially if you have a Kindle or a Kindle app, is that it does make kind of getting into the book a little bit easier, because on Kindle you have Kindle X-ray, and what this does is you can like click on the name of a character or a location, and it will show you sort of who the character is, what they look like maybe, or if it's a location, it'll tell you a little bit about the location. And because there are so many locations and so many characters in Game of Thrones, this really was a big help to me, because sometimes you go, who was that guy again? What did he look like? And then you could like click that, and it made it a lot easier. I think now that I've read it, I could probably reread it again sometime and read it in physical copy, because I have a little bit more of a guideline. But this is a really big help. I think it will make it a little bit easier to get into. I actually found it quite easy to get into. It's like any high fantasy novel. You have to like give it a second. They're introducing a totally new world, and you have to like figure out that world. And I would say it only took me like maybe 3 chapters to like get used to it. I don't know that I would recommend it for a first time high fantasy reader. You might want to try some YA high fantasy before entering the adult high fantasy world of this one. Still think it's, in terms of high fantasy, pretty easy to get into, in my personal humble opinion. Overall though, I was super invested in this book, and I loved reading it, because I was like, so when can I go back to reading Game of Thrones? I know that I have to like live my normal life existence, so when is that going to be over though? Because I need to go back and read Game of Thrones. I'm definitely going to be continuing on with the series, because I'm actually at this point afraid that I'm going to accidentally spoil myself. And I gave this 5 stars because it rocked. We come to the last book that I read in April, and it was The 1000th Floor by Catherine McGee. This book takes place in Manhattan 100 years or so from now, and it is about 5 characters who live in this very tall building. In this building, it has a 1000th floor. The higher you get in the building, the more wealthy you are, and the lower you get, you're obviously less wealthy. And each character is from a different tier in this tower, and it's basically about what happens to them and what happens to kind of connect them. They are all characters with a ton of secrets and a ton of different lies and things to worry about, and insanity ensues, I can tell you. So this book is often described as a book that's kind of a futuristic Gossip Girl. And as much as I hate to compare other books to other books, I have to say that that's probably the closest description that you can get to this, as somebody that watched Gossip Girl and also read at least one Gossip Girl book. The only reason I would make that comparison is because the genre, even though it is science fiction, is sort of the same. It's got that sort of soap operic, like crazy things happening kind of storyline, as well as similar kind of characters because of the way they live. There's like the wealthy characters and then the less wealthy characters and how they interact. And so that is sort of a Gossip Girl-esque sort of world. But the characters are very different and have different struggles in the book. So it's not like a direct copy of Gossip Girl, but in the future when I say that it has that comparison. Now, I feel like there are a lot of great elements to this book. The author really did well at writing different multiple perspectives. This book also has really nice world building. I feel like the futuristic technology and things like that are really believable, and they aren't just like there to be there, you know? The kids actually use them to propel the plot, and so the technology isn't there just to be like, I'm going to make up my cool technology. It does feature a diverse cast of characters, which is really nice. The storyline is well put together, and I did get invested in it. Now, I would say the only little, like, thorn in my flesh about this book is that the characters are definitely not my type of people. I'm someone that usually, not always, but usually reads a book to kind of visit with my bookish friends. Like, I like to view the characters in books as my best bud, and I want to root for them and all those things like that. And maybe there's like that character you love to hate, but you know, you have to have those two or there's no drama. When I was reading this book, these are people that I think are a little too high maintenance for me to visit with every day. Like, I cared about them. I wanted to know what was going to happen to them, and I cared about whether they lived or died, and I worried for them. But I was like, yeah, honey, your first world problems are just so very first world, okay? Or I'd be like, really? We can't figure out how keeping that secret is not cool and kind of dumb? Or I'd be like, honey, I know you're rich and crazy, but please, come on. What I'm saying is, though the characters were really well developed, I could only read like a few chapters of this, and then I'd have to put it down for 3 days because I'd go like, you're just an acquaintance. I can't hang out with you guys every day. I read this book really super slow. Also would say, unlike something like Gossip Girl, which is kind of funny, and you have some like really interesting people that you could like ship together, this book is not the kind of book where you want to like ship people, and you also kind of go, this isn't at all funny, because you pretty much know from page 1 that doom is gonna ensue. I mean, but though I make these sound like big qualms, they really weren't big qualms with the book, as long as I could like take my little breaks. I didn't mind reading it slow. I did really want to know what happens, and like I said, the good stuff in this book is really, really good. And I feel like the really good things about the book definitely outweighed the few little things that made this book a slow read for me. I'm not even going to say that they were things that I didn't like, because they did come from genuinely good character development. I'm just going to say they made it a slower read. And if you're somebody that likes the sort of like secret super teenage drama kind of thing, this is definitely a book that you're probably going to want to check out, especially if you do like science fiction, because that does kind of give that element a new spin. And the end did justify actually having a sequel to this book, which this is supposed to be part of a series. I'm not sure if it's going to be a duology or a trilogy, but it is going to be series. So I do think at the end of this book they justify having a second book, which was something that I was a little bit concerned about. But I would say overall that I gave this book a 4-star rating with like some 3.5 moments, because there were just 2 moments that I was like eyeball roll, but it was like, it's okay. It's the type of book that it is. On to what I'm going to call my sort of TBR, because I have so many books that I want to read. Like, I'm having that like I want to just read everything kind of mode, but I have 4 books already on my currently reading list, and some of them are the big old tomes, so I'm probably going to only get to 1 book in the month of May, but I have not yet decided what that 1 book is. So here are my options, and I'm going to kind of like mood read within these options. So the first one is to just read that second book in that Song of Ice and Fire series, Clash of Kings, because I really do need to know what happens. I'm not sure if I want to like jump right into a tome after like all these other tomes that I'm still reading. So my backup plans, if I don't read A Clash of Kings, are to read Firebird by Mercedes Lackey, or I'm going to reread the annotated Pride and Prejudice, because that is on my reading list for the year. But I haven't decided what mood I'm in, and I'm just gonna try to like get a little further into my tomes first before I decide. But it's gonna be one of those 3 books. So that is it for a wrap up today. I hope you guys enjoyed me babbling about the 4 books that I read, and I hope you have an awesome, super great day. I will see you all on Thursday with a new video. Thank you for watching. Bye!